Welcome everyone to Programming Fundamentals 104. Today we'll be talking about IDE and editors. So let's move on. What's an IDE? Well, IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. That is, for example, I am doing a project or I'm writing a script for my program. So there should be an interface in where I can write down my script. That's text editor, but IDE is a more developed version of a text editor in which I'll be having the compiler and the text editor and many more different features included in the same software. So looking at the two programming languages, here are some of the IDE examples that we like mostly use for the development. One is Visual Studio. Well, Visual Studio is used for, I believe, each and every programming language, so we can use Visual Studio for any programming language that we want to code in. Next is the C line. Well, I very much like prefer C line because JetBrains provides these awesome IDEs where we can have version control or auto debugger. They are much more smarter. Yeah, that's also one of the main point of IDE. They are actually smart. Like, so if you're writing any script or code, they are actually able to provide you the built-in function or suggest you the method in which you should write the code. Looking at Python, well, we have PyCharm, Spider, IDLE. So I believe we'll be mostly using PyCharm for the development. It includes all type of development, like if we are working with a simple basic script or doing Jupyter notebooks or any kind of development. Next is Spider. Well, Spider is mainly used with Anaconda. So Anaconda is a version of Python 3.6 or 2.7, which is mainly including all the libraries which we use for machine learning and data science. IDLE is the most basic IDE that is provided with Python setup. So when we'll be trying to install the Python setup in the furthermore video, we'll see that when we install the Python, IDLE comes with it. Moving on, what do we need to know about IDE and how do we select a specific IDE? Well, I think it depends on mainly these three things. Operating system. So, for example, if I'm using an Ubuntu, I don't actually need that much of IDE or text editor because Ubuntu mainly it's made for development. So it's directly executable from terminal, and I don't need actually the IDE, but still, yeah, IDE improves the quality of the code, so yeah, we can actually use it. For example, if I'm using Windows, it's very much suggested that you use an IDE for that one because it's not actually made for programming purposes, and IDE provides you the best interference and the environment for that one. Language chosen. Well, language chosen also depends on the language that I've chosen for working with my IDE. For example, if I'm writing a Python script, a small Python script, I don't need a big much of IDE. But if I'm working on a Django, a framework of Python that I hopefully will be discussing in the courses, I'll be developing a website. For that one, I cannot just simply write that in a text editor and make a whole website. So for that purpose, I need an IDE. Third one is the scope of our project. This actually means how big our project is. From the starting one, if we are practicing or learning a programming language, IDE is actually not preferred by most of the people because it's a small project and it can directly be executed by the command prompt or a simple text editor. But if I'm developing a very huge project related to some website or making predictive models or any of the other kind of software, professional software, I definitely use an IDE. Oh, so okay. So what's a text editor? Well, text editor is just a place or window where I can just write my code down. For example, most of you, well, every one of us is aware with Notepad. That comes an inbuilt text editor in Windows operating system. That's a text editor, so you just write down the code in there, and then you cannot run your code in a text editor, so you need a different compiler or interpreter. So that's what's actually differentiate an text editor from an IDE. You cannot run it in a same window or a same environment. You have to do it separately. So there are actually two type of text editor I can classify: a simple text editor and a hackable one. Well, simple text editor is the one that we use for all kind of texting and development. For example, if I'm using Notepad or Sublime Text, these are simple text editor which supports all the programming languages that we want to do. Talking about the hackable text editor, well, for example, here we use Atom. So, or a hackable text editor is the one that we can modify for our need, and then like if I'm developing a microcontroller program through C programming language, I want my text editor to perform certain and specific kind of task that I want with it. So I want to make a necessary change in my text editor, so that's called hackable, not the one that we usually think of as hackable, not that one. Well, some of the text editors that you can use and I do prefer are Gedit. That is the first one. It's actually inbuilt text editor in Ubuntu, like the Notepad in Windows operating system. So Gedit is an inbuilt text editor for Ubuntu. Sublime Text is a very useful and a famous text editor that most of the programmers use, and it's very user friendly. I like it too much. Talking about Atom is the most, like, the highest quality developers use it. It's completely hackable. You can modify it to your needs. It's having its own community for development. You can make your all changes in that one. Copilots, well, it's an additional concept that we should know about. Like, if you are coming into programming field, you should know at least what's a copilot. In the previous video, like we talked about documentation, we whenever I'm making, for example, if I'm implementing a method and I don't know how to implement it, I'll be scraping over the internet, find the documentation that is provided by it, study it down, and then implement it. Well, that reduces the efficiency of a programmer. So what do? We use a copilot. For example, I'm developing my code up in here, and my copilot will be open here. So it will analyze my code and whatever the development I'm making, and it will suggest me all the documentation and the development method in which I should be doing the code. Improve the code's quality. Well, I believe some of the people say that we should not be using IDEs, we should start doing with text editor, or we should not use copilots. Well, unless your code quality is being developed, it's good for you. It doesn't matter if you're using an IDE or documentation. The most important thing in coding is, I believe, is the code quality. So you should be knowing how to write down a perfect code in a perfect manner, perfect syntax, not just in any of the creepy ways. One of the examples that I want to highlight is Kite. Kite is mainly provided for Python, but they are developing it for many programming languages and will be coming soon in all the operating systems, I believe. So that's all for this video, and thank you.